It's working. Hello and welcome to LSE for this evening's event, Alternative Forms of Political Participation, Youth, Co-Production and Participatory Art. This event is hosted by Contemporary Turkish Studies at the European Institute here at LSE. My name is Yaprak Gürsoy and I'm Professor of European Politics and the Chair in Contemporary Turkish Studies at the European Institute. I'm very pleased to welcome Melis Cin, Manu Lekunze, and Rahime Süleymanoğlu Kürüm to our audience. Unfortunately, Craig Walker, who was our fourth speaker, couldn't make it tonight due to an unforeseen issue, and he has a very legitimate excuse for not being here. Let me briefly introduce the speakers in the order they will initially speak today. So our first speaker will be Rahime Süleymanoğlu Kürüm, who is a senior lecturer in politics of gender at Manchester Metropolitan University. Then we will have Melis Cin, who will speak next. And she is a senior lecturer in education and social justice at Lancaster University. Next, we were hoping Craig would speak, but since he is not here, Rahime and Melis will take over some of the things that he will say, and they will take turns to complete Craig's presentation on his behalf. So today, Rahime and Melis will introduce and share the findings from their Photo Voice project, which they conducted in Türkiye, South Africa, and Uganda. The project brought together refugee and host community youth through the exercise of taking photos to reflect on their everyday experiences. The project analyzes the experiences of producing participatory art projects and the co-production of art exhibitions through the lens of epistemic justice and resistance. So I believe the speakers will also explain what they mean by those keywords, co-production, epistemic justice, and epistemic resistance. After our speakers introduce the project findings, Manu Lekunze, who is a lecturer in international relations at the University of Aberdeen, will provide some feedback and kickstart the discussion. So for you, a couple of reminders on the running order of this panel. I would appreciate it if you could please put your phones on silent mode if you haven't done so already, so as not to disrupt the event. Please also remember that the event is being recorded and we will try to make it available as a podcast and video later on. And there's also hopefully going to be a transcript of this event later on. So after the initial presentations by our speakers, which will last around 45 minutes or so, there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions, and I will let you know when we will open the floor for these questions. After the panel, there is going to be a drinks reception outside. There's apparently another event going on and another reception. So we will be on this side of the floor. And we hope that you can join us and continue the discussion in a more informal setting. So without further ado, Rahime, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can I take the...
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Sorry, I need to open yours.
This one? Yes.
Lovely. Here we go.
All right, thank you so much. Good that I can see. Thank you very much for the invitation for the chair of Contemporary Turkish Studies. It's a really nice pleasure to be here and to be talking about and elaborating on this project that we did together with Melis Cin. So this was actually in the Arts and Humanities Research Council, AHRC funded research, which took a comparative understanding of like how art-based methodologies like photo voice can be used to empower youth and then to provide youth participation. And so it was this HRC project that brought together these three countries, South Africa, Uganda, and Turkey, to understand youth participation in a different way, not the conventional ways of participation, because we apparently realized that conventional methods of political participation do not speak to the realities of every community, marginalizing some but empowering others. So we, in this project, we looked at photo voice, and we took photo voice as a method in various dimensions, actually. Participatory action research is actually including many other methodologies that use art as a medium to bring people, because it is actually equalizing the space. Our theoretical base is coming from epistemic injustice and epistemic resistance. Epistemic injustice is broadly speaking about credibility assigned to individuals based on who they are and their age, their gender, sex, their race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. So how people can be considered as credible actors, because this is shaping how meaningfully they can participate in decisions that shape them. So we took this participatory action research as a methodology. We have been working on it in various ways, using photo voice, using participatory video, but also Melissa has been working on others like graffiti as well. So the aim of it is to create spaces for political participation and epistemic resistance. And for this particular project, our aim was to bring refugee and host communities, and to bring youth, particularly from refugee and host communities, and to see how they actually speak and communicate and learn from each other when the medium is art and photo voice, taking photographs. So we had this research in 3 research sites, and South Africa, Johannesburg, Uganda, original settlement, and Türkiye, Istanbul. And we worked with total 38 participants from like ages to 18 to 25. So photo voice is photo voice is using basically use of photography to express lived realities and concerns and needs and hopes of the people. What we did actually, we gave a photo camera to youth and we paired them together, one refugee, one host community youth, and we have handed them a photo camera to share their common stories, their shared experiences as youth living in these cities, in these areas. And we wanted them to document their strengths as a community, as a youth, not just to talk about conflict, but also to talk about what they share in common and what common problems they identify as youth. So we focused on the areas that they can communicate. And promote photo voice, we found like it's an excellent way to engage in a critical dialogue, because when they started to talk with the shared identity of being youth, and then they used medium of art, then they were able to communicate very successfully and engage with each other, even engage their community, which Melis is going to talk a little bit more about. So the shared goals of the photo voice participatory action research in general, but also photo voice project that we did, is documenting community concerns and strengths. What concerns each community, whether they are host community, where they are part of the refugee community, what do they have? Engage in a critical dialogue, but most importantly, engage with policymakers, because this is something that they have been struggling both to find the common language to be able to communicate with policymakers, and also the space to engage with policymakers. And photo voice and participatory action research made this possible. We treat photo voice as a medium of political participation. It can be well treated as an intercommunal learning methodology. It can be treated as a research methodology. Yes, it was a research methodology for us, but it was also a form of political participation, because all of a sudden their concerns shifted, like how can we make our voices heard by the policymakers. What is the best way to talk about our common stories and how to challenge them? So it's a knowledge production process, and what happens is like personal stories are translated in collective narratives, and these narratives they've been working very hard, and it was actually designed to help them provide them a safe space so that they can actually work hard on how they formulate their strategies and find their best ways to communicate with those to actors with power. That includes NGOs, policymakers, but also local authorities. And so that was a form of epistemic resistance. So their voices are not heard. They are facing epistemic injustice because they are youth, they are migrant, and so they face different layers of marginalization. And so this was a way to gain visibility and engage in a resistance in a very peaceful way, in a very peaceful space. So we did this methodology of most different systems design, especially in the paper in Youth Studies, Journal of Youth Studies, because when we look at these three contexts also in the project methodology, the idea was to work with the diverse contexts that are different, and how can we actually use these different contexts, but use arts so that it works in every way. And actually, our aim was to explore whether it works in every setting. And therefore, we looked at three large refugee hosting countries: Turkey, Uganda, and South Africa. We conducted 66 interviews. Some of them included also the participants in the exhibitions, but also the actual participants, and reflective meaning. So the differences of these countries: Turkey has been following an open door policy for Syrians and providing them free healthcare and education. When it comes to South Africa, that was more limited. So there was also, when the research was conducted, just as the start, we had xenophobic attacks and limited access to jobs and services. So that was quite different, although they were both large refugee hosting countries. But for Uganda, it was more like an ideal host narrative. It was in a refugee camp, so in a smaller setting. But the outcome was actually quite similar in all three countries. We had growing discrimination, precarious living conditions, hostility and undocumented migrants, and clustering of the conflict with the host community. So that was the outcome was the same. So we wanted to see if, when we use the medium of art, photo voice, as a medium of communication and bringing them together, whether it would work. And I think overall these were the participants that we engaged with. I don't know if it is easy to read, but totally we interviewed 66 participants. We paid careful attention to gender distribution, and also we looked at especially for Uganda, the diversity of the refugee, sending countries. And we did also, most importantly, as we are going to talk about later, we have used exhibition spaces as the continuation of it, which Melissa is going to talk more about, but exhibition spaces are usually a little bit neglected and overlooked aspect, because the idea is co-production, producing with the community, involving them in the decision-making process, but it stops at some point. And I think our research gave significant attention to the exhibition spaces to bring refugees and host community, and presenting them, all the youth, as photo artists. So that was quite empowering. And finally, I'm going to just talk about a little bit about Photo Voice project and co-production. This is, I think, a growing literature on co-production, citizen science that involves also municipalities, local communities engage with that. Okay, and so basically it's a growing medium, and it's a growing research methodology, also political participation methodology. Since we conducted our study, it is used more and more in local communities as well. But there are, of course, we are using arts, and then most important, we are using photography, right? And that brings challenges. So initially we provided them with ethics training through a pre-engagement workshop, and that pre-engagement workshop provided significant space like for engaging them, also trust building, how to take consent, and what to pay attention to when photographing people. And so it's a step for providing them with the visual literacy. Then we took the opportunity to go out for the outdoor photography, still with the photographers who are offering the training and ethics training as well. So we paired refugee and host community youth, although pairs of two. Although in Istanbul they went out in all of Istanbul, all of them, so 6 pairs, so totally 12 people. And so in the end, which we are going to talk a little bit more later in the exhibition space part, but we asked them to identify five images. So that included a lot of thinking, discussion, deliberation, which photograph is more better than other, like how to choose which photograph is actually communicating the message better. So that method of elimination created a significant space for communicating and helping them out set their most important and pressing narratives. Yes, I think I'm going to stop here, and so I will pass the floor to Melis.
Thank you so much, Rahime. Thanks a lot. So I am going to be talking about forms of political participation, and also a little bit about arts, what arts bring into the space of these forms of political participation, because often, that's great, actually.
Is it this one or?
No.
This one.
Yes, that one, thank you. So one often, I know that when someone says you political participation, you often think about very conventional forms of political participation, right? Just voting, or being a member of a party, or signing a petition, which is actually in the political participation literature, the scholars have categorized as conventional participation. But there are also unconventional participation as well, which is protests, boycotts, squatting. I mean, think about all these events that have taken in the sense of occupying spaces, like Occupy London and so on. This was a kind of an unconventional form of political participation. But then when you look deeper into it, you see that there also political participation has 3 kind of main areas or forms of participation, which is more political, which is more resonating with the formal, voting in elections, joining political parties. There's social participation, like volunteering and community groups. When you do volunteering in your community, actually, this is a form of political participation as well. You're showing a social aspect of that political participation when you're dedicating your free time to help someone in your community. And then there is also civic-based participation, which is more about issues, and you might just go and do something to raise awareness about climate crisis, about gender equality, or rights of refugees. And this kind of a civic participation is usually based on an issue that you really care about. So these are also forms of political participation. Oops, did I miss anything? And what we have seen is that actually, because of the, let's put it this way, because we are all living in immature democracies and the entire Europe and the world is transitioning into authoritarian governments and so on, what the literature shows us is that youth is becoming less and less interested in formal forms of political participation, which means that they don't want to go and take place in political parties. They don't want to, they're less likely to vote. They're less likely to trust political elites. So they have developed their own alternative ways of participating in politics. And for instance, one of them is like commenting on social media, right? Expressing their views on social media, or forming their own groups. You would know that if you have ever been to Occupy London in 2014 and 15, there will be public forums where the young people come together and then they will talk about politics there. So they refused to appear on more formal channels of political participation because of lack of trust to elites. So this was one of the things that actually we tried to draw on as we were doing this research. And given that in this research we were working with refugees who are actually a lot more marginalized than the citizens themselves. So for them, a political participation, for them expressing their views, even giving an interview is just like something impossible for them. So that's why, as we see the trend that how the youth is kind of going towards more alternative forms of political participation to express themselves, we try to understand how youth is engaging actually in more non-institutionalized forms of political participation. And what we have found is that this is usually going through more community engagement route, where they want to voice their concerns, influence authority, challenge power relations, change narratives. But the way they do is that rather than just taking over streets, rather than just meeting the politicians to express their ideas, they are using much more creative forms of art to do this. And of course, photo voice is one of them, though it's not the only of them, because I've been working on this field for quite a while now, and we have used also other different forms of political participation. Manu, as you would know, like in Zimbabwe, we use graffiti. I know that in Cameroon, you use storytelling. So trying to engage the youth in a way that they express their concerns through art. Why they express their concerns through art? Because it is much easier to capture the attention of the policymakers and the public. I'll just come to that question later on. But what I want to say is that political participation, I want to ask, is political participation for every youth? Because what we see is that there are still, of course, a good number of youth who would still go into the political parties, who would take more formal and institutionalized ways of participating in public and political life. But what happens to the refugees, displaced groups, or even women, right? Or ethnic minorities, or the youth who are coming from quite different cultural or social backgrounds, which they don't really feel comfortable in entering those political spaces, which is quite androcentric and requires certain level of education and high social and cultural capital. So they feel like, when you look into literature, and also that was also the case in our participants, they feel like lack of recognition. They don't feel like those spaces are safe for them. They feel like their voices are overshadowed. That's even by the NGOs that they work with, or even by the political allies that they work with, or negative narratives portray them as free riders, ungrateful, or that's not even refugees, or that's not even case for refugees. I mean, even if you look into ethnic minorities or any marginalized groups, right? This is the issue that you have been facing. And actually, it's the same for the women as well. When you look into women's political participation, they are less likely to participate in these political forms of structures, particularly in countries where there is less welcoming space for women, or for ethnic minorities, or for those who have been kind of casted to the margins pushed into the margins of the society. So we can say why art matters in political participation. Why did we use arts? One of the things is that actually arts create spaces for them. I'm not going to go through, like everything. I'm just going to pick up to maybe, because of the time, important things, and we can just discuss the rest in the Q&A part. But it creates spaces, right? It creates spaces for them to be seen, to speak, and it creates spaces where they feel invited. So this is a photo from Istanbul, and you see here a Syrian refugee. His name is Zahar. He has been living in Istanbul for 6 years, and he wasn't able to speak Turkish very good. I mean, he had a very kind of a broken Turkish, but was good enough to communicate. And one of the things why he participated in this project is that he wanted to make contact with local youth because he was living in suburbs of Istanbul, and he had no contact with the host community youth or host community at all. He had seen no prospects of a better life for himself. So he thought that if I'm part of a project like this, if maybe it's an opportunity for me to express what I think, what I experience, and what I really want to, see the way out from this life, which is kind of pushing me into the corners and the suburbs of Istanbul. Maybe there is a way out for me to really meet people out there. And this was a very spontaneous photograph. It wasn't planned at all. They were in Sultanahmet. And you may know the Sultanahmet is one of the busy and touristic places. And they were, with their cameras, taking photographs and so on. And one of the little boys approached him and said, asking, what are you doing with that camera? And he said, I'm taking photographs. They were actually not very much able to communicate because of lack of language issues, but he said, can you teach me? And that was a Turkish boy. And then he started teaching him, and they spent like half an hour there, and the boy's parents were there. And as he was teaching it, someone just took this shot. And what Zahra said about this shot is that it was the first time that I had a real contact with a Turkish person. So it was an opportunity for him, to create a space for his own existence, but also it was an issue of building a solidarity. Because after that, they started to talk with the boys' family, they invited them to the exhibition, and so it was just, there was a conversation going on and a relationship going on afterwards as well. What else art can do? So that's another picture.
You haven't changed the slide.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't. Oh, sorry. So art is also an action. It contests dominant narratives, reclaims visibility, but it also doesn't need, words. With this one picture, it tells a lot of things. So you don't need to get a permission from anyone to speak the issues that you face. And this again, and it can cross borders, and it can open a public deliberation. So this was taken by Mohammed, and again, one of the Syrian refugees. And what you see in this photograph is actually Mohammed arrived in Turkey, in Istanbul, when he was only 7 years old. And he's been living for quite a while in Istanbul. And since the day he arrived, he had to work as in these textile factories, 16 hours, in conditions that we don't want anyone to work in. And of course, he was getting paid a peanut. They needed money. The conditions weren't ideal. So this picture was just to kind of make a statement about the child labor, saying that I wanted to speak to my boss that this wasn't ideal conditions for kids to work in, that we shouldn't be working at all, but that at that time I also needed money too. So the money was kind of here silencing him, but at the same time that money he needed is also was the plaster he needed to really get out of trauma, to have a better life. So it's just has a dual meaning here, that I need money to really recover from what I've been through, to survive, but at the same time, that money kind of silences me, because the moment I speak, I'll lose my job. So most of our participants, particularly in Turkey, and also some of our participants in Uganda, were not able to, speak the native language of that country. So through photographs, they were creating themselves spaces and building solidarities across different groups, but also they were speaking through photographs without getting permission. Especially, how do you speak? How do you voice your concern if you're not speaking the language of that country, right? Or if you're struggling with that country? Because public forums, public deliberation, public discussions always requires well-trained voices where you need to make apologies, where you need to speak in a particular way, in an assertive way, and in a fluent way, right? So this has been one of the issues. Then, sorry. And I want to later on talk about, we're going to touch a little bit in the exhibition space now, but I don't want to romanticize arts here. Because art is not, the solution to different forms of political participation. So it can shift the power immediately. For instance, probably you also remember that the Amal project. Do you remember the Syrian puppet going around the world as well? So it was also a little bit the feeling I got in our project that sometimes these art performances is creating an aesthetics of suffering. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's just like you are watching it, and that kind of puts that suffering in a very eloquently way. But then what happens is that as audience, you get lost in that aesthetic, and then you don't really miss the message as well. So there is also, I hear, a risk that, when you present the way that you present, that sufferings, the way that you present message can just really be much more in the front than giving the central message as well. And it's also visibility. There are issues of visibility and tokenism as well, which we're going to be talking with exhibition spaces.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
So 10 minutes, approximately 10 minutes for the exhibition spaces.
For the exhibition.
So this is what Craig was supposed to present,
yes.
but you'll take turns covering. You worked on the project together, so...
Yes, exactly, and Craig was responsible for the Uganda case study, and
thank you.
Was leading the Turkey and South Africa.
So thank you again. So I'm just, we are going to just take turns with Melis in the exhibition spaces. So the idea of photo voice or participatory action research is usually designed as a co-production methodology. So the process is valuable, process is always documented. And, but then there's this growing criticism, like, you take the data from the community, you learn from them, but then what do you do with that? So it's also kind of like research ethics, and we were talking about this in the process, the design of the project, and then we thought that the photo voice methodology, both as a policy making methodology or sampling methodology, or the process, is not giving enough attention to exhibition spaces, and we thought that this is quite valuable in itself, and it is perhaps a little bit more empowering and visible. So we idealize this as something very positive, and we hope that it would be positive, and so it was generally positive, but there were some limitations which we are going to talk about. So then our starting question here is that what happens to the experience of participants and the artifacts that are created? Okay, we have a bunch of photographs in 4 countries, now in 3 countries, and a lot of photographs have been produced, printed, and then, how are they given outlet for the political engagement? Is it just a process, but the process had included limited policymakers, and then, the photographs will be exhibited, but then will they understand the same message? Will they get the same communication from that? So we thought that actual exhibition spaces should be equally participatory, and then we thought that exhibition setting is very valuable in itself. And this is very misunderstood aspect. We take the message, the pictures and images, photographs, art pieces, they communicate, but it doesn't make the same meaning for everyone, especially if very difficult to step out your privileged position if, the target and the objective is to speak to policymakers. And then we thought different forms of exhibition should be designed in the project, which we did in different countries. And we think that there are 3 ways exhibitions are connected to the youth political agency. One is exhibition is actually social commentary that you communicate the message, maybe the powerful aspects, the sufferings, with the problems, pressing issues. Apart from that, it's a community engagement. It's beyond the setting, beyond the space, beyond the participants. It delivers a broader message of the community. The community experiences are shared among each other. But most importantly, this is actually the only setting that they have directly engaged with or had access to policymakers. Because in the other co-production process, we have in a photo voice project, maybe it's a different setting, but when it is used as a citizen science co-production methodology for policymaking, there are language or linguistic barriers or epistemic injustices like the identity-based prejudice enter into space. We see that, people participate, but they don't speak, or they speak, but they are not heard or listened to. This is because of the, the privilege coming and then, inability to understand the marginalized very much. So exhibition spaces, we hope that they will be focusing on the most pressing issues and the issues that they couldn't communicate. And for Uganda, lack of access to employment and education. In Turkey, the pressing issue was LGBT rights and how to communicate this to policymakers. And in South Africa, xenophobia. Before handing this over to Melis, I would like to just say a little bit for a few words about the exhibition space and the design, particularly in Istanbul. We communicated with the participants in the whole process. We set up a WhatsApp group and they changed the WhatsApp group like it was a community really. And then they have designed the invitations. They have decided the setting, and they have decided that this should be in the most accessible place. And Hünkar Kasrı, which was in Eminönü, one of the most touristic places, and it is an old Ottoman pavilion attached to a mosque, yes. And it's also a space, accessing to Grand Bazaar, it's very touristic and also community, like not just touristic, it really represents the diversity of Istanbul. And then we thought this is a great idea, and the university supported us, and then they have made really good. They have advertised all the invitations designed by the participants themselves, and then it went into a method of elimination. Then the process started to get a little bit complicated because it was a mosque, part of a mosque. Then some pictures start getting eliminated. And then they have already eliminated some of the images, and maybe this one, I will give the floor to Melis, that, the design that we wanted to create, yes, maybe it's a lot more progressive than many of the Photo Voice projects, but it wasn't without its challenges. And here I'm going to pass it to Melis.
Exactly. So we don't want to paint a great picture that arts is a great alternative form of political participation, because I think the real importance of arts is just like lies in the exhibition space or performance where you share it to the wider audience. But then you just come up with some power dynamics, right? For example, I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the power dynamics in every country. We exhibited as it is across 4 countries, Istanbul, Uganda, Orichinga, Johannesburg, and Lancaster in the museum. So in Istanbul, you will just see the middle picture, which is that's one of our Syrian refugees, and who is identify herself as LGBTQ and wearing a headscarf. And he said that the first time he was able to come out as a lesbian and a conservative refugee woman was during Istanbul when he joined the Prides. The LGBT prize, and she wanted to take this picture without showing her face, but you can just see the behind, to give the message that we do exist. Mm-hmm. Of course, this picture was not displayed in Istanbul because there were concerns that the exhibition space was next to a mosque and it will create some reactions from the public. So it was
but also the participants, right?
Exactly. So it was very interesting. There was that, but also some of the participants were themselves, against showing this. Particularly, there was no reaction from Turkish participants, but the one Syrian participant said that if this photo is being displayed, I'm not coming in. So, well, anyway, we didn't have a chance to display this photograph because, if you're just so close to mosque, you don't want to create a public reaction. So, which means that actually whose voices is getting represented or whose voices is being kind of, there's a power issue playing, not every voice is getting represented as well. I think there was another issue around Uganda as well, and that was about the NGO. So when the Uganda exhibition, what happens is that the NGO was kind of speaking over the participants. So they were much more interested about the photographs. So this is not aesthetically good. This is not a good quality photographs. But the aim wasn't about that. The aim was about get their voices heard down to the policymakers. But again, there was just like there was lots of tension between the NGOs and the refugees who were saying that, you're not hearing our voices, but you're just kind of focusing on much more the quality of the photographs, but that's not the aim. So again, here, what kind of voices, which voices are being casted out, who is being listened to, is playing an important role as well. So just like as a final thing, when we come to the South Africa, what we have seen is that making it public is also making it risky, right? Because as the exhibition was taking in Johannesburg, there was the second for the most kind of violent xenophobic attacks in South Africa at that time. Therefore, many of the refugees didn't feel really welcomed or safe enough to come to the exhibition space, because although we offered them, that we're going to pick up from your home, we're going to drive you to, exhibition space, and then we're going to make sure that you arrive home safe. It was still like two of the participants, refugee community participants, didn't want to participate because they were really scared for their lives. So, and also we didn't open to the public as well. So in Lancaster, in Istanbul, in Orichinga, it was open to public, but the South Africa workshop was the only one which wasn't open to public, and it was only by invitation only. But the good thing is that we got a lot of decision makers. We got the ambassadors. We got the ambassador of Turkey to the room. We got British High Commissioner into the room. We got someone from the Uganda embassy as well. But we also get lots of people from Department of Education, also Department of Housing, and so on. So it was really a good way to reach out to to decision makers, although they haven't been as successful as integrating with the public in general. So I'm just going to stop here.
Excellent. This was brilliant, very interesting project indeed. And I wonder what Manu will say in reaction to all this fascinating research.
Thank you very much, and thank you guys for coming to hear us speak, or hear Melis and her colleagues speak. So I have two things to say about the research that I've been very fortunate to read. Not much about, because it's not really my field, but about the topic in general. So the two things I will say is, first, about the subject. I think the subject is really important. One of the things that I think people are familiar with, but we don't talk a lot about, is the youth participation, especially when you were talking about youth outside of the West, or maybe parts of Asia. You might know that Africa's population is very youthful, the youngest in the world. In the past 30 years or so, Africa's population has tripled. So if we're sitting here in the 2000s, we'll be talking about a population about 500 to 600 million people. But right now, we're talking about 1.5 billion people. Right? That is an extraordinary growth. Most of these people are under the age of 30 or just over 30. And so talking about youth and political participation is a very important subject we're talking about. Unfortunately, as well, connecting it to refugees or to displacement in general is also very important. What you might not know is you might see a lot of Africans trying to cross the Mediterranean to Southern Europe and stuff like that. But the vast majority of Africans who are displaced within Africa. So looking at places like Uganda or South Africa, which are a huge host of displaced people, whether they are forcefully displaced or voluntarily displaced, is also a very important topic to be looking at in the 21st century. One thing I should note about this displacement and growth in Africa's population is that you might not have seen the statistics, or you might have seen, but around 1 in 4 people in the world by 2050 will be African. Towards the end of this century, around 1 in 2 people in the world, that's all of humanity, will be African. So there's no way, regardless of where you are on earth, whether you're in Europe or China or Latin America, that this wouldn't affect you in some way, right? If 1 in 4 people on earth is African, you will feel the pinch in one way or the other. So thinking about how African youth participate in politics is important for all of us, regardless of who you are or where you are in the world. One of the other things that Melis and her colleague have been very polite not to mention, and that's the second thing that I really like about the study, is the methods, right? The alternative methods, thinking about different ways of youth participation. One of the things they've been very polite not to mention is that it's that the youth, or the Gen Zs, or whatever they call them these days, are partly voluntarily going to alternative methods, as they mentioned, but it's also a product of that the political space is stifled. You will know that a lot of these countries, for example, Uganda, let me use Uganda as an example. The president of Uganda has been in power since 1986. So he has been in power longer than most Ugandans are alive. Right? Because if you think 1986 to today, we're talking roughly 40 years, and most Ugandans are under the age of 30. So he was president before most people in Uganda were born. So that is the space that these young people, or the youth, have to politically participate in. And the conventional methods that of participation are the ones that these autocrats or dictators or authoritarians, whatever word you want to use, are the methods they are most competent in stifling. So if you want to vote, they know how to rig elections. If you want to join a political party, they know how to exclude the wrong kind of people joining the party. So going to alternative methods where these people are not competent in is, again, a very useful contribution, because these are new or alternative methods that can bypass some of the restrictions that these authoritarians have already been very successful at using. So in general, I think this is a timely and useful research that is necessary to raise awareness about some of the issues that are going to affect all of us, as well as introduce different or alternative ways of participating, and bringing stuff like epistemic justice into discussion, also broaden their study so that we can think not only about other forms of justice, but the more silent forms of injustice, like epistemic injustice. So not to take too much of your time, this is my brief comment on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers.